Welcome to Means of Grace, a podcast produced by the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church.
Welcome to this episode of the Means of Grace podcast. My name is Brian Mateer, and I am the Director of Missional Engagement for the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church. In my role, I had the privilege of working with some of the international mission partners of our conference. 2023 marks a significant milestone for one of our longest-standing mission partners. Project Agape recognizes 30 years of mission and ministry with the people of Armenia. As we celebrate on our past efforts, we also look forward to what God may be doing among us in North Carolina and with our friends in Armenia. We have set out looking for new ways to invite clergy and laity to the work of Project Agape. Earlier this year, we offered our first pilgrimage to Armenia for young clergy and laity. Christianity spread to the country as early as 40 AD, a movement attributed to the apostles Thaddeus and Bartholomew. It became the first official Christian state in 301 AD, 36 years before Constantine the Great was baptized. WNCC clergy and lay members visited ancient Christian sites, learned about the Armenian Apostolic Church, spent time in self-reflection and prayer, and experienced the ministry efforts of Project Agape. On today's episode, we hear a reflection on an Armenian pilgrimage from Britt, a lay member of Myers Park United Methodist Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. Hi, Britt. Welcome to the Means of Grace podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
You mentioned in some of your reflections after returning home from the pilgrimage in Armenia about some sacred spaces that you encountered. Can you share with the listeners a little bit about maybe one or two examples of where you felt this sacred space?
Yeah. So before Armenia, I see and I spend time with God really anywhere. And so my quiet time, I have a corner in my couch. I spend time with God. Mm-hmm. That is sacred to me, or going on a walk and being in nature and creation is sacred to me. So going to Armenia and going to all of the monasteries where there's a heavy influence of the monasteries being sacred, I was taken back by the importance of the monasteries and going into them wondering, okay, this is a building, this is a church, but what is sacred about it?
Yeah.
And that was kind of the question I had throughout the trip. And what I was learning was it wasn't necessarily the physical building or the monastery itself, but what I learned and experienced was the stories and the experiences with people there before me and the impact that had on their lives and how that impacted me. And so when I think about the sacred spaces, it was the lineages of believers before me that were there worshiping, and it was really impactful.
Yeah, I think one of the things that struck me too is, like, oftentimes where there was a church, there was some story of a person that church was dedicated to. I mean, dating even back to Thaddeus and Bartholomew, who first brought Christianity to the land. And I mean, we have nothing like that in the United States. I mean, we got church buildings, but nothing to connect that ancient history of Christianity that far back. So I think was really cool. Tell me how maybe that was different from, how you came home after the trip and maybe thought differently.
I think you speaking about just the history in Armenia versus the history in the United States in the sense of church buildings, coming back and going to my church, which was, to me, I think it's older and historic compared to some of the newer churches. But going there and worshiping there versus worshiping in Armenia, it was just another sense of, whoa, like God's been working in Armenia for so many years and the people there and just the faith and those of the martyrs that were persecuted that like I don't experience that in the United States or see often or ever. And so coming back, it's a sobering feeling of the symbol of a church there versus a church here.
Yeah, I think one of the things I found funny is one of our guides mentioned that the church was a newer church. And we were like, well, how old is it? And they were like, oh, it's 12th century. I mean, we think of an old church here being, maybe 300 or 400 years. But there, I mean, it's hundreds and hundreds of years old. So that I found that. And it's cool to be kind of connected to that experience of other believers around the world that we don't have. It's it's our story as well. In one of your reflections, you had mentioned the song, How Lovely Is Your Dwelling Place. How did this song resonate with you during your journey? Tell us what that meant to you on the journey and on the pilgrimage and returning home.
So that song is the way that our service on Sundays opens up in worship. And that's how we kind of begin service that way. And so kind of walking to the monasteries or being in creation and just going on a walk or sitting there, that song just kept coming to my head. And I have never, before Armenia, I would never sing it outside of church of just, welcoming. It's kind of the welcome song. And so being there, I just the Lord was putting it on my heart over and over, because all the places that we went is where he dwells. And what a beautiful picture coming home is when I walk into different buildings or situations, God is still dwelling among me. I try to now fix my perspective of, if God's with me, he's in this conversation, and what is he trying to speak through this encounter, whether it be a new church or, I work with students. And so meeting a new student or a family, it's kind of shifted that perspective, or just kind of highlighted God's dwelling place. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, unlike several of our other participants on this young adult pilgrimage, you mentioned that you work with students and you're a teacher. Tell us a little bit about your experience with the vocational school, maybe. Tell the listeners what that is and how that connects with what you do as a teacher.
One of my favorite moments of the trip was really getting to know Project Agape and getting to know the people that work there and the ones. So Christine is the person that, works at the vocational school and does hair and nail and teaches students from Armenia. And being there and getting to see the work that goes on was very encouraging to me as an educator. And an experience that still sticks with me to this day is that one night Christine was very adamant and very kind in wanting us to have our nails done. And so she offered for us to have our nails done. And it was late. It was after dinner. And, dinners last pretty long. Yeah. And I was like, oh, no, it's time for bed. You do not have time to do this. And she was very insistent on getting the time to do our nails. And so we went and she did our nails and she did an amazing job. And just the modeling of her as a teacher and her sacrifice and her compassion for someone that she just met. What a beautiful, I would love to be in her classroom, and the way that she teaches the other women that are in this program to be that same way. And so she really modeled what a teacher does in the sacrifice, but also she's incredible at her job. And so it was a great experience and a reminder for me as a teacher. Okay, I need to model what it looks like to, do well and have integrity in my work, but also give space and time for those that maybe selfishly, I'm going to go home and sleep. But she stayed up late to do our nails. It was and we had someone translate, but she doesn't speak much English. And so that was also another piece of just her willingness to have the translator translate our conversation. Sure. And that really stuck with me.
Yeah, I think maybe a lot of our listeners don't know. They associate Project Agape with the Christmas shoeboxes or shipping some of the things that we do overseas. But I think the vocational program is not only an exciting ministry, but a very impactful one. And it's something that the Project Agape board is trying to expand upon. And one of the things that we're going to do as we move towards the 30-year celebration in October is to raise funds for a new vocational program and center that we can expand the offerings of vocational learning and training for folks, not just women, but also men, perhaps in carpentry skills and maybe mechanics, and a lot of different offerings. So I think it's a great way that Project Agape gives kind of a hand up instead of a handout. Yeah. So One thing I noticed that, and most everybody that has gone on a trip to Armenia with Project Agape talks about the hospitality. Share a little bit about what that meant for you and what you particularly noted with the hospitality.
So I've had the privilege to travel around the world and experience culture and hospitality in ways. So I've gotten to kind of experience all different forms of community and hospitality, but Armenia stands out because of the lingering. And what I mean by that is not only was the meal that was prepared for us exquisite and lots of food, but it was the intention behind it and the intention, before, during, and after the meal that just exemplified their hospitality. So before the meal, all of the food was out on the table before we arrived. During the meal, everyone that's a part of Project Agape ate together. And so we got to experience, meals and that time of conversation with everyone around the table. And then afterward, we were never able to clean up for ourselves because they would immediately clean up. And I was always like, can I please help cleaning? Because I love to clean and I want to help. But it was just this beauty of being able to sit back and allow them to be hospitable and take that. But after they, cleaned up the table or, gave the dessert, we just sat there. And we sat there in conversation, or we sat there and a musical instrument was brought out, or we listened to music, or we watched a video, and we would enjoy time in fellowship at the table for much longer than the meal lasted. And that was a beautiful example of hospitality because it was the lingering and the witness that in our culture today, you eat and you go home. Or, people are trying to rush you out the door. But we would just sit, and it was so much fun.
I love that lingering and witness. I love that. That's going to sit with me. So what would you tell others that might be considering a future pilgrimage or a trip with Project Agape? How would you encourage them, or what would you say to them?
I would first of all say go. And I didn't know what to expect. This was kind of the first of hopefully many trips. And so letting go of the holding on to the itinerary or knowing what's going to come and just having the opportunity to let go of the planning, just be excited to encounter the unexpected. That's something that if I were to go and I knew what to expect, I wouldn't be as curious. And I appreciate the fact that I was able to have curiosity because I didn't know. And I got to learn so much about Armenia. I got to learn so much about just the history of the church, and also Project Agape. And so now coming back, I have this huge love for Project Agape that you can hear about, and you can watch the videos and do the shoeboxes, go to the Mission Response Center. But being there with the community, it has this, I don't even know how to describe it. And so I would just encourage people that have some interest of knowing what it's about to just go, regardless of what they know.
Well said. Well, thanks for your time, Britt, and thanks for sharing your reflections from Armenia.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Means of Grace podcast. If you are interested in learning more about a pilgrimage to Armenia to be offered in the fall of 2024, please contact Brian Mateer at bmateer@wnccumc.org, or visit Project Agape on the Mission Engagement page of the conference website. Also, if you would like to learn more about Project Agape and celebrate 30 years of mission and ministry in Armenia, please join us from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. on October 21st, 2023 at Mount Pleasant UMC in Greensboro. An Armenian-inspired lunch will be provided. Details and registration are available through the Conference eNews communications.
Thank you for listening to Means of Grace, a podcast produced by the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church. We hope you enjoy listening to these podcasts and use them as a way to stay connected to our community. Remember to subscribe to Means of Grace for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please leave us an honest rating and a review. It helps others find this podcast. Follow the WNCC on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at WNCCUMC. Once again, that's at WNCCUMC. Means of Grace is produced by the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church and Andy Go of Gojo Studios.